Hey folks, Drill18 here, and welcome to my discussion of my Ludum Dare 29 entry called Drill18. So Ludum Dare is a game programming competition where you have 48 hours to make a game. So obviously you have to make things very quick, and things tend to stay a little bit rough around the edges, but other than that, it's really fun. I do live stream the whole thing from start to finish. And this video here is me basically doing a post-mortem, kind of an autopsy of the game. You know, what went well, what went badly, and also talk about, you know, the actual mechanics for just getting it done. So, there will be links down in the doobly-doo where you can play the game and also see the Ludum Dare entry page. Also, I did a video on my main youtube.com/Drill18 channel where I went and played a complete game of start to finish of this. So if you don't know what Drill18 is, I definitely recommend you check it out. I mean, basically, it's sort of it's like a Sim Tower clone, but we are digging down instead of building up. And that's all there is to it. And you can build different types of rooms and whatever. It's all got that pixel art and so on. Okay, so talking about the implementation, if I go ahead and hit play over here, and I've got the game running over here on the left-hand side, if I zoom out, you can see the game area here. Now, if I scroll around, it actually expands the number of tiles, and if I zoom in over here, you can see that every little bit of this is an individual little tile game object that I can sort of decompose. So when you move the camera around in the game, it checks to see if all the tiles that are needed to exist to show in the game view here from the camera. If I flip off 2D mode, for example, here, you can very clearly see the game camera over there. So I do a check to see what tiles should be visible within the camera, because all the tiles have names based on their position. It's tile underscore, and then it's their X position. So tile -7, -4 is at X -4, Y -4. So you've got that there. So the camera code knows, you know, just based on like the width of the screen and the size of a tile, which is just, it's one unit, one world unit. It knows that, oh, I should be there, tile -7 through +7 from, you know, Y equals 0 to Y equals -10 or something like that should be visible at this time. So let's make sure those all exist by name. Now, this is actually relatively slow to do in Unity. I should turn the music off. Sorry about that. This is relatively slow to do in Unity. And the reason is Unity game objects are relatively heavy. Instantiating one is kind of slow, and just having a whole bunch of them existing, it can be a little bit hard on the system if they're all active. And the reason is they're all relatively heavy objects, right? They've got all these transforms and sprite renderers, and you know, they might have multiple scripts, multiple like collision boxes, animators, all these different components, and every single one of them runs every single frame. So as you get to this point here where, like, quite rapidly, I'm going to get hundreds, well, at least 100, if not hundreds of game objects all running simultaneously. And if we bring up the stats, you can see here that the frame rate is, well, right now, sorry, I realized that by default, the frame rate will be V-synced. So if I play this, actually the frame rate might not be too bad. So we're getting 600 frames per second. I go into, I should have gone into sandbox mode over here. As I scroll around, you'll see the frame rate drop. I can't, it's hard to see just because things are overlapped, but it's currently 180, 140, 120. I'm going down. Now I'm under 100 frames per second, and I'm on a really beefy computer. My gaming computer is very, very powerful. So now scroll to the left. I'm down to 60 frames per second. And now I've scrolled down far enough that I can actually see the victory condition, but I'm already down to 60. And if you're playing this on a weaker computer, at this point, you're probably at 30 frames per second, if not lower. And that is really reaching the point of not viable. And that's just a factor of having so many game objects in the game. The other thing, and if you've watched my Unity 2D tutorial where I make the cloney bird, or the Flappy Bird clone, one of the issues we struggle with a little bit in that game is weird little gaps appearing between tiles. Now here, it may look like there's a gap, but that's just the grid that you're seeing behind it. But it can happen at certain zoom levels. If I grab the camera over here, where's my main camera, and just mess with the projection side a little bit, and we look in the preview window, not getting it to happen, and it's really bizarre. Sometimes there'll be little gaps between tiles, and sometimes there won't be, especially if I go down here. Yeah, it's like extremely odd. And this, I'm using like programming to actually like place everything at exactly integers, right? We're not, you know, accidentally named with 0.99 or something like that. That might result in the gap. Like here, you can see a gap. And again, if I scroll right back up to the surface. You can see the tiniest little gap. Well, these would show up even if I had everything exactly lined up on an integer value. The other thing you need to do, one of the things you're supposed to do to not get the problem, is in your sprites, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. In your sprites, make sure they've got point filtering turned on. Make sure, you might have to go into the advanced mode like this. Make sure there's no mip maps. Make sure it's not compressed. Make sure it's just on something like automatic true color. Make sure your texture is a power of 2 and is square. All these little things, and I was still like, my first evening, I spent well over an hour just trying to eliminate these gaps, and eventually I sort of ended up fudging it by just having the camera's orthographic size to be just right. There's scripts you can attach to your camera to try to make it so that true pixel things. Anyway, it was all not working very well. I went to bed with it not working, and then when I was lying in bed, I decided to open it up on my Mac because it was bothering me so much. So I opened up my MacBook Air to work on it, and then there wasn't really a gap, and I was like, what? And then when I went downstairs in the morning and I reloaded this, there was no gap anymore, and then sometimes it would be there and sometimes it wouldn't be. Sometimes it would be there in a web player, sometimes it wouldn't be, sometimes it would be in there in the standalone client, sometimes it wouldn't be. So the whole thing was pretty bad. I will say one thing, Unity's 2D engine's got some pretty cool stuff going on with it, but it is really not meant to do this sort of tiling background. One, because you can sometimes get those weird little graphical gaps between things. The other thing too that I found I had to play with is in the quality settings, I had to make sure that there was no anti-aliasing, because that was another, there we go, see, anti-aliasing is turned on, and now I've got gaps here. Like, you can see there's like tile, 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 tile. Well, every fourth tile now I'm suddenly getting a gap because there's anti-aliasing turned on. So all these little gotchas and weirdness, and certainly in pixel art kind of graphics you do want that turned off, but that was not worth the headache. But more importantly, it's just not very performant, right? You've got so many tiles as your background, it doesn't work out. It's less of a problem if you take the approach where there's only a certain amount of tiles. Like if here I was maybe like destroying tiles that weren't visible, like in a side scroller, that might become kind of viable. Or in a side scroller, your background tiles wouldn't need to be this small. There wouldn't need to be as many of them. You'd have these huge background panels. That would be okay. And then, a few little like platforms that you would jump on from time to time. You might delete them as they come in and out of the view. But it's still not super strong. The one thing that was actually pretty good for a long time here, did my worker go away? I think he left because he was miserable. But we'll get a new one here as this shuttle lands. Boom, there we go. So we got a new worker. One thing that I did find pretty handy was working with the sprite tool. So if we go into the sprite editor here, make this bigger. Here's my sprite sheet. Every graphic in the game is on the sprite sheet. Mostly. Yeah, the diamond core is on a separate thing because it was pretty big, and some of my little GUI elements, but most of the graphics that are in the game are part of this one graphic, the 512 by 512 graphic. And what I've done is you can sort of draw squares around your graphics. Actually, the shipping version of this has a slightly, I thought, wrong placement on. It's actually one of these ones being dug out. It's like slightly offset. It's really weird and kind of annoying. I may have corrected it in this, I'm not sure, but the one that's on the Let 'em Dare website definitely has the bug. Anyway, so I drew it around there, and then doing an animation in this 2D is really quite easy, because what you can do, like my eating animation here, after you've sliced everything, either automatically or manually by just dragging out a sprite, you can then click apply. Here I'm just going to hit revert, but you can apply this, and in your sprite object, it brings out all these little sprites. And so if I go and find, I'll be close to the end, won't it? Yeah, like the little drinking animation. If I take these two and drag it out, it will create a new animation for me and then drop it in the world. So I canceled that, so this guy's not actually going to be animated. But if I grab the worker drinking, oh, well, that's just the animation. So it's a bad example. But anyway, our little worker here is definitely, doing stuff, wandering around. If I were to go ahead and tell him to dig out a dining room, he would go ahead and start doing that. So the actual, the worker is here. Here's the animator set up for him. So it's got all the different animations you can do, and then a variety of booleans that can turn on and off, whether he should be doing the walking, working animation, climbing when he's going up and down the ladders, sleeping, eating, and drinking, and so on. So if I go here and I put down the dining hall, and now he will eat. So in my script, it's got, while he's eating, while, you know, he's spending 4 seconds here regenerating his eating need, then he will set is eating to true, and then that animation will be getting played. So so that was pretty easy to work in. The other thing I could do is open up the animation panel, and then if I grab someone like my worker, I can see all of his animations. And then they're pretty simple. I mean, if I expand that, you can see it's just alternating between 2 sprites. It's actually a bit more meaningful with the shuttle over here, because like the shuttle's arrival is a series of moves. Like it's played out right now, the shuttle's like way off in the sky where it's hiding. But as soon as it starts its arrival cycle, it's just going to play this. It's a series of positions, so it comes down here and then hovers over here and then comes down. Meanwhile, it's alternating the flame graphic back and forth. And at the very end, it goes to the unlit graphic. And, oh, here we go. Here's the arrival. You can see it'll hover for a sec, land, turn off the flames, and then it'll drop to the idle animation, the shuttle off, which is just nothing. But also notably, the shuttle arrival script at the very end here, actually a pair, right there, it's got an event. It calls a function called stop shuttle sound and another function that says has landed. So the shuttle has its own script. If I pop that bad boy open, wait for mono develop, you'll see it'll have 2 functions on there that get called by this animation. That's a really good way to trigger events when the graphics look correct. So as soon as the flames turn off, I turn off the shuttle sound. And then at the end of this animation cycle, it properly calls like, hey, I have landed, do stuff. So if I look at has landed over here, it sets a timer for when it should take off again. It collects any ore that I have sitting around, converts it into money, does a little graphical pop-up that we can talk about that in a bit. It finds any tile. So all my rooms and everything is considered to be a tile. It will look through all the tiles, find any of them that is looking for more workers than it has. And if so, it will spawn a worker for that tile. Workers get individual careers assigned to them. And then after that, it'll find out if there's any workers that are trying to escape the planet for one reason or other. They will escape. They will try to leave if they're unhappy, if one of their needs hasn't been met. But it will also leave if you delete their workspace, for example. You only lose points for people who escape due to unhappiness, though. Then it destroys itself. And then here's where it checks after it has already picked up the ore and given you money. It checks to see if money is still under 0, then issue a bankruptcy warning. If I've already done the bankruptcy warning, well, this is if we've already done it, then game over. And if otherwise, then give the warning, give you a little bit of money. We'll just set the money to 1,000, and then we set the bankrupt warning equal to true that we've done it already. And then, some extra code like that. So working with those animations was very handy. But the problem I ran into on my second day when I decided to do outfit swapping. So this guy here, so I have the builder room. If I go and drop a drill room in here, and if I cheat, I go to my shuttle, and I just force the do arrival animation. So it will land right away. It will give me a drill worker. Now the animation is going to be kind of fucked up. Yeah, there you can see it's like bouncing back and forth a little bit. The drill worker has arrived and he started to work. And it would have been really cool if I could have given them different outfits. And in fact, if I look, right, so I've got my primary sprite sheet here, and then I have another sprite sheet for the driller, refiner, scientist. And if I open any of these, you'll see, like, because I was doing it at the end, I was just like, okay, I'll just copy the whole thing. But then I went and recolored it. So this is the scientist sprite sheet. So they're in like white lab coats. The refiner here is wearing a green outfit because he, I don't know, works with chemicals or something. And then the driller has a dark gray cap and sort of a dark blue purple kind of shirt on so that they would look slightly different. And so what I'd hoped on the worker here, oh yeah, you've got your moodlets going on. The worker has a sprite renderer, which points to a particular sprite that is being displayed. And here you can actually see it being cycled around. And that's actually what sort of screws things up in that what I had tried to do in my code is set get the sprite renderer, get component sprite renderer dot sprite equals, and then assigning it to, a different sprite sheet. Well, what I could do is I could assign the current sprite to, like this, right? I could assign it to this specifically. But as soon as the animation would play the next frame, it would go back to being what the actual next frame in the animation was, which would be, one of these guys. wherever my sprite guys are, you know, like one of these. So it would switch back to the normal shirt, and then it would just go back there. There was no way for me to just tell, like, swap out the entire graphic overall, because I realized, and this is a convenience of Unity, when you slice things up like this, effectively you are creating, just inside of Unity, these new image files. And so an animation is not referring to this sprite sheet necessarily, although certainly as a rendering point of view in terms of optimizing things, it is. But it's the animation is really referring to this specifically. And so just trying to swap out, there didn't seem to be a way to swap out the actual texture file behind the scenes in any way whatsoever. And when you think about it, the reason that, like, oh, it finally clicked in, yeah, I understand why they're doing it this way, is because you can do 2D animations without using these sprite sheets. I can have individual images. I could have, you know, in a folder somewhere, like here, I have a series of just flat pictures. Well, if I grab 3 of these and drag them into my world together and do, you know, anim test like that, it will create this animation based on these 3 graphics I just dragged into the world. Like here, and if I play this, you'll see it'll cycle between these 3 tiles. So you can do animations with 3 separate graphic files. So that's why when it cuts up a sprite, it really has to keep treating all these different sub-sprites as individual images. So there's not a really good sexy way to do the whole texture, what am I looking at? Like palette swap or base texture swap, which is really unfortunate. But there we go. So now it's animating. So that's just a limitation of this particular technique of doing it, which is why I have been working on a redo of Drill18, a sort of extended edition that doesn't use any of the Unity 2D stuff, and I'll give you a quick little preview of that in a bit. So let me take a little sip here. We'll talk about the worker AI. So the worker AI was definitely, well, I don't know. There was a lot of really hairy bits in here. So and you can get all this code, by the way. Part of the condition of submitting a game to Let 'em Dare is providing all the source code, so you'll be able to go ahead and grab this and inspect it. Keep in mind, the code is not actually open source. You cannot actually use it for your own commercial projects, but you can certainly learn from it by reading through. Although, being a 48-hour game programming competition, there's a lot of really, really rough code in here. But if we take a look at the worker, the class definition, first of all, the worker has a name, and this I read in from my Twitch TV subscribers. And then it's got 3 prefabs that get assigned to it. Those form the basis of these little moodlets that pop above their heads, what they're complaining about. So if one of their needs exceeds a certain threshold, they will put up these little moodlets to let you know that they're miserable. Here's the actual thresholds. When it reaches 0.5, they will actually try to satisfy their need, if they're able to. When it reaches 1, that's when they will start whining by bringing up the little pop-up. Also, the very first time someone starts whining about something, you will get a dialogue. So the moodlet will come up and you will get a pop-up dialogue box the first time they start whining. And if they ever reach their hard limit of 3, then that's when they leave. They flip on the I'm escaping this planet. They go and wait at the launch pad or the landing pad until the next shuttle, and then they leave. Here's their needs where they're actually tracked. Their need for sleep, food, and fun. They also keep track of their bed. So bed tiles, and I can force one. This will probably lead to something really weird. But if I just drop a bunk room in here, he's going to try to reach it. Wow, that'll actually work. I'm amazed by just dragging it in here. They will try to sleep on here. So this bed tile has a class on it, has a has beds component. So, and the worker keeps track of like which one they have. So they like personally grab a bed. Well, has bed, what they're grabbing is this entire tile. But then inside of this tile, it'll keep track of which worker has been assigned to specifically which bunk, which is probably more detailed than is necessary, but it felt good at the time. It led to so many bugs. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. Anyway, here's the workers' speed. So this is their like base speed. Their base speed can get multiplied by basically a science factor. The more science you accumulate, the faster they'll go. So their actual speed will be their base speed multiplied by the science factor. So this will go up over the course of the game. So I have a job queue system. So this drill room, for example, has put on the queue a job that says, "Come work me." Now, see, here you go. This guy here just went and he's now working that job. And if ever he stops for any reason, which he will do if I put down a recreation center over here. So he'll go over there and get himself a drink. Okay, yeah, it's messed up because the elevation's not right, so he actually just stopped there. Like, this is obviously not the way the game is supposed to be played. I guess what I could do is actually very quickly dig out a little example for us to be discussing here. Do that. And that should be enough. Anyway, so they will what was I saying? Yeah, so the work spot. So they grab a job off the job queue. So the drilling room will put a job on the queue, and then the workers will grab jobs off the queue and work them for a while. And then if ever they have to stop working because one of their needs becomes too high, then they will mark the job as complete, and then the room will then put a new job back on the queue, so that the cycle continues. So we'll drop a bunk room, we'll drop a dining room, and we'll drop a rec center over here, so that we'll have a full little ecosystem. And so this builder is going to have nothing to do anymore, so he's mostly just going to wander around till his needs do anything, and then this guy will alternate between drilling, working the drill over here, and then also satisfying his needs. So right away you can see this guy got hungry, so he's going to go and do that. So you guys can just keep watching that in the background. I'm parched. Okay, too many videos in the row. And then they've got the career. So when they arrive and they spawn, they are specifically assigned to a tile as their career. Now, it's a little bit misleading because they're not guaranteed to work that one tile. But what it means is, like, the drill room here has the driller career type. So when the shuttle lands and spawns a worker, it will tell you at the bottom, oh, a driller named so-and-so has just arrived. And if ever I delete this room, and I can do that here, I can click on this drill room, delete the room, this guy will then leave. He will go up to the launch pad and disappear. If I put down a new drill room, he will still leave, because the room he was specifically hired to work for has gone away. So when the shuttle comes, he will depart, and a new driller will show up to replace him there. But other than that, any driller will work any drill room, because of reasons. It's just the way that I got around to making the job queue system. How I would do it in the final game, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We'll make some different decisions. Anyway, this whole career to sprite thing, this does nothing. This was all part of my code to try to get it so that the workers would have different outfits based on what job they worked, right? So you can see career to sprite. It was like the driller job, refiner job, scientist job, and then I would like map them to a different sprite sheet. And none of that worked, which is a real shame because I went through like all the effort of programming and colorizing the sheets and didn't work. I mean, there's probably ways of cheating it, but the built-in 2D animation system, and it's the animation system that gets in the way. If you do your own kind of animations, then you can swap sprite sheets, I guess. I don't know. This keeps track of our current animator. This work spot is for some buildings. This was another pretty significant challenge. If I dig down here, then my digger will actually go to work. Although the lower down I dig, the harder things become. Can I cheat and give myself bonus science here? Oh, it's the job queue that has the science thing, and it's not exposed to the public. Oh, that's a shame. Anyway, the science thing will actually it has 3 desks that can be worked. So this one building offers 3 job spots, and so when people arrive there and start working it, they will grab a specific job spot to work there, so that way only 3 people will ever work there, and they'll be sort of lined up in the right place. It's somewhat similar to how the bunk beds work. Not exactly, but this guy here, this is our builder. He will always sleep in that bunk bed in this room, for example, which is kind of neat, but perhaps not entirely useful. This number just tracks the total number of workers in the game. You can see here the 2. Interestingly enough, that does not get reset if you restart the game after winning or losing, so the count can be off on follow-up games. Just a little bug. So let's see, on initialize. Yeah, so all this career to sprite thing, basically we can ignore because it doesn't work right. Increase the number of workers, grabs the animator. And the very first time every time a worker arrives, it adds, yeah, this is just calling. I'll show you the dialogue object dialog script later on, but it announces that a worker has arrived in the bottom right corner of the thing. And when destroy, we announce that we have left, we decrease the number of workers, make sure our career has been, knows that it's got one less worker. If we currently had a job, make sure to like mark it as done. Even if it's not completely done, the rest of the system will be responsible for putting this job back in the queue. This whole thing, I do not like. Excuse me, I do not like the way that the job system was implemented because it's very messy and took a lot of time to debug. But again, you know, you get things working and like as quickly as possible to get the prototype going. You rush for time and then you keep sort of adding on and adding on. Sometimes you realize you painted yourself in a bit of a corner with your initial implementation, but you just kind of have to roll with it. And then, oh yeah, and then the last thing is, again, when they leave, we have to make sure that they release any beds they might have personally claimed. So this is how long it takes them to drink or eat or drink, for example. And this is how long they've currently been eating or drinking. So if we pop down to the update script or update function, so every frame, we update our speed based on how good our science has gotten. Oh, that's why I can't edit in the inspector. It's because it's a static. So it's base speed times the science boost will give us our actual speed. Well, it's the square root of it. For reasons so that people weren't warping around. We make sure to turn off all animations. You'll notice that is sleeping is not in there. That was another one because of the way that I implemented things. The sleeping behavior was weird. And actually there was a lot of the early builds would sometimes lead to people being stuck in a sleeping animation. So they'd just be like walking around looking like they were sleeping. It was very awkward. We update the moodlets, so the things above people's heads. If they need a moodlet for some reason, then we'll do that. If we've exceeded the hard limit of any of our needs, then we will put a pop-up letting the people know that a worker is leaving because they're miserable. We'll cancel any jobs. We will lose points from this guy leaving. We force the is sleeping animation to be off. Again, such a pain in the butt. And the behavior we do this frame. So this is in update. So then we say, all right, now do escape planet and return, like end the update. Then we check to see, hey, do we not have a job or anything like that? And this will happen. So this is if the building, if the room we were assigned to, basically when we arrived on the planet, if that has been deleted, then cancel any job we might have, which probably aren't applicable anyway. Again, make sure to turn off sleeping, and now we're going to do the escape planet again, but we'll notice you're not losing any points. We're going to go, hey, do we need to sleep? And if so if this returns true, then it means we are currently attempting to walk to a bedroom to sleep. If we happen to have a job, make sure to cancel that job and then end the update. Check our needs. Do we have any needs that we need to eat or drink? And is there a restaurant and or a bar? If so, again, cancel any jobs we have running and end the update. Finally, we're going to try to work. If none of these things were true, we are going to try to grab a job off the job queue and do that work. We'll look at this function in a bit. And if that was successful, then we will return. Otherwise, we're just going to wander back and forth slowly. So if we look at some of these, let's start with TryWork, actually, to start off with. Do I have my outliner? Oh, if I double click on that, I thought it would bring up my outliner. Or pads, document outline. And let's drag that over to the side. Thank you very much. And I don't know why this is not alphabetical. Oh, there we go. Because I got to turn that. Okay, so let's look at TryWork. So with TryWork, if we don't have a job, then try to grab a job from the job queue. If the job is no longer null, so if we successfully grab, and we have to pass ourselves, we pass our worker to the job queue, because the job queue is responsible for giving us a job that is appropriate for us. If we are a builder type, then it will give us a tile that's been flagged for digging, or a room that is that needs repair. So it'll return that. If we are a driller, it will return a drill room that is not currently being worked, that sort of thing. So we've got a job at this point. Check if it's not diggable and it's not a broken tile. And again, I shouldn't need to sort of check this way. Anyway, you're just doing things fast and getting them to work. So assuming we're not a builder type person, basically, then it's a tile that needs to be worked as opposed to dug or repair, and all of them have a work spot. So a place for the worker to stand in and do his work animation. Some of them have more than one. For example, the science centers. So the drills will one of the has the work spot, this little console. So whoever, this guy, after he has a drink, he's going to come and stand in front of the console and punch it. And the scientists, there's 3 of them, 3 of those spots that are in there. And if I click on this tile and expand it, you'll actually see the 3 work spots that people can stand in. So it grabs one of those, and if for some reason the work spot comes back null, which should never happen. Early on it was, because a few things were buggy, but I think in the shipped version of the game, this should never happen, because you should never get a job that doesn't have an empty work spot, but just in case. Anyway, if it does, cancel the job and return false. Anyway, so at this point, we should have a job with a work spot. So unless there's no jobs available, in which case we're going to end up doing a return false over here and just going to a wander behavior. So at this point, assuming at this, we'll double check. Okay, we don't have a null thing, because again here, if it's null, we try to grab a job. Then at this point, we either have a job or we don't. Do we have a job? Yes. Does the jobs tile still exist? Because I could have a job for a tile that just happened to get deleted. Now again, I believe this should get cleaned up. This job.done should clean up the job.tile assignment, but just in case, we'll check it anyway, kill the job if need be, make sure everything is cleaned up and awesome. So at this point, we have a job with a valid tile. So what we try to do first, if we're not on the right floor, we're going to move to that floor. Otherwise, we're on the floor. Hey, oh, then there's 2 different behaviors depending on if it's a job where we're digging and or repairing versus a job with a work spot. Because these digging and repair jobs, the behavior is to walk until you're adjacent to the tile. You can see this here. We'll get a builder, whoever he is, will come and be adjacent to the tile and punch it to dig. Whereas a room with a work spot, they'll go into the room and go to the assigned work spot and do that. So that's got 1 job there, and then otherwise it's a work spot job, which has a slightly different behavior. If we get here, there's something just completely fucked up. So again, we sort of cancel out of this whole thing and go there. So many bugs in the system. So that is the example of TryWork. I'll show you TryNeeds as a slightly different example. So first we check to see if we're here because TryNeeds gets tried no matter what. It just returns true or false. So if our food need is above the threshold and we need food more than fun, then we're going to do the food thing, which is we're going to find that we've got a function helper here to find the closest tile that produces food. And so we'll find that. Assuming it found one, then what we're going to do is try to get there. So if we're not on the right floor, we'll move to the floor. If we are on the right floor, then we will try to move to the right position. And here we're just moving. I never got around to getting like eat spots and drink spots, so they just move to the middle of the tile, and then they will sit there and do the animation. They will start the timer countdown, and they will just do the animation until they're done eating. And finally, they will, return false that, oh no, we can do something else. Otherwise, return true, which will end that update function. Then we do the same thing for fun. So we've got a lot of little things like that. The next thing we'll look at is some of the tile code, for example, here. Actually, what I should perhaps do, and we can look at all that. The map object itself has a lot of scripts on it. Resource manager, the map manager is pretty important for actually producing the tiles. I realize I probably need to increase the font size. Sorry if it wasn't completely legible online for the last part. But yeah, so the map manager, what is the default tile? Flash countdown, this just, originally when you would click a tile to dig, it would blink on and off. I decided that was a little too annoying, so didn't end up using it, but that's what this bit is in there originally for. When we start, we spawn the needed tiles. Also, every time the camera gets moved, so you can see here in the update function, this is what responds to the arrow keys or WASD keys to move the camera around. Then every time that happens, we will spawn any needed tiles. And this is certainly a slow function. This is not very fast, and this is actually the reason why you can't click and drag the screen around. Because every time you click and drag the screen, even for 1 pixel, it's going to have to run the spawn needed tiles, and it's not a very good function, so that's why you can't click and drag, because of reasons. So it checks to see if it needs to spawn any tiles, and again, it's not very fast. If we're, interesting to note, if we're below level 20, then it will spawn diamond tiles, otherwise it will spawn default tile, which is dirt. Things are pretty hard-codey in here. Again, time, man, time is just brutal. It's got functions to help you find tiles at certain X and Y coordinates and different things like that. How to name the tile. Here's how we actually build a tile. This is like for building a full room. So it'll keep in mind like the size of the tile when it's placing it. It will destroy anything behind it. So, because when you do dig out a tile, what happens here, it's actually, this is still a tile. This is a tile called, I think it's called empty. But you could also, yeah, empty. But you could also think of this as hallway. If I click on it, no, it doesn't bring up a pop-up for it. But it's like a hallway tile. So when I build a room in here, like a drill room, what it actually does is delete all those hallway tiles and then drops one big 3-tile wide tile. Which, you know, was again kind of tricky to get right. There were plenty of situations where the tiles would be doubled up. I'd move this and there would still be a hallway tile behind it, which could lead to really weird behavior for all kinds of different reasons. So another really funky piece of code. The dialog code is kind of interesting in that you could assign, and this is, I think it's all part of the map object here. Yeah, the dialog here. I could assign a variety of sequences. They'd be named based on like a title, which is not actually the title in the end, it's just some name. So I could call a function to show a certain dialogue sequence. So like the introduction would go, it would go this image, then this image, then this image, then this image, this one, this one, this one. It could easily cycle through. It handled pausing the game while the tile was up, for example, and all that kind of thing, just to try to get it to yeah, I don't know, make it a little bit easier. You could also call a sequence up with a one-shot command. So wherever that function is, start dialog sequence by string, you can specify if it was one time only, and it would flag it so that, like for example, what would be an example? I just can't think of one actually, but you can see someone stuck on the stairs here because I've got, again, things in a sort of screwed up position, which is causing these guys to misbehave. I can't think, but some of them were like, the first time a worker whines about stuff, it'll give you a pop-up about it, and then it'll sort of leave you alone at that point there. So that was kind of fun to do, so you might want to look at that code. That's actually part of the other reason why there's some bad frame rate performance, is because anytime you use the Unity's on GUI stuff, it's never fast. It always has some pretty bad frame rates, unfortunately. Which does kind of suck, but there you have it. Are there any other codes I want to show? The job queue might be a good one to look at as well, really quickly. And the science boost is in the job queue because of reasons. You know, this is not where I would put it in a real game, but, you know, it just happened that way. Keeps a list of all the open jobs. When the level gets loaded, so this happens on reload as well, it resets the science boost and clears the job. So again, really in the worker AI, it should have one of those functions to reset the number of workers right over here back to 0 when a level gets loaded or reloaded, for example. So the job queue has a subclass in it, or like a child class in it called job, which keeps track of like which tile issued the job, which worker is working this job, if any. This could be null if no worker has grabbed it yet. Yeah, for every second complete this percentage of the job, which this would be 50%. So this would be a job that would take 2 seconds to complete by default, for example. Whether it's being worked, which I actually think, I might be wrong, but I'm willing to bet this Boolean doesn't get used, because I'm pretty sure I checked instead to see if there's a worker. Or rather, what actually happens is when a job is being worked, it gets taken off the job queue entirely. So I'm willing to bet this doesn't get used anywhere. Or if it does, it doesn't really serve much of a purpose because there's other ways of doing it. Time for task is just the inverse of the work rate. Here's where we initialize a new job. So to create a job, you have to give it a tile. It's the only way to construct a new job thing, which makes a lot of sense. And then, yeah, you can call job.done, which will remove itself from any tiles. It'll remove itself from any workers. And then if it's still on the queue, it'll get removed from there as well. Initial open jobs just makes the assignment over here. Yeah, we cap the science boost rate to 100, which is still ridiculously fast, but what can you do? Add jobs to the queue. This is the take job. That's not terrible. So this is when a worker wants to take a job off the queue. So, I mean, we make sure we have any jobs whatsoever. We loop through every job, starting from the oldest, which is at the top, and going down. The exception to that are the repair jobs. Repair jobs get stuck on the top of the queue, because there's a max priority function over here, where if you call max priority and you give it a job, it will take the job off the queue and then insert it at the top of the queue. So the repair jobs do that, for example. But otherwise, it's from oldest to newest, first in, first out kind of thing. So yeah, it loops through all the jobs and it tries to find one. First of all, is the tile reachable? This is pretty important. Like if I put a dig job way over here, this will get skipped over. Technically, it could like queue up a bunch of dig jobs, and that would make this function take a little bit longer because it's looping through more tiles, but it's not really a problem time-wise. So it checks to make sure the tile is reachable, and that function is defined as in this game, there's only this one central ladder. Okay, there's no other way to travel vertically. So it made it easy to determine if a tile was reachable, because this tile will simply check, it knows if it's to the right or to the left of the ladder, so then it just checks the tile to the left of it, and then left of that, to make sure it's flagged as walkable. And really the only tiles that are not set as walkable are these dirt tiles. So if it hits one of those, it returns false. Pretty easy to do. And then it makes sure that the type of the job, so if it's diggable, or if it's tile that needs to be repaired, and the job is builder, these are the only workers that can dig or repair, then it will return that. If it's neither broken, yeah, right here, if it's not broken in any way, and even diggable tiles are technically flagged as broken, but instead of being repaired, they get, torn apart. So if it's not broken, and the tile's career type matches the worker's career type, then it gets assigned. Otherwise, it just returns null. So anyway, that is it. That's like, there's lots of other little scripts in here. Some of them aren't being used. Some of them are just crap, and that you should ignore them completely. But hopefully there's still a little bit of something to learn. And what I can also do is show you a little sampler of the tile map engine. The tile map engine is nowhere close to having reincorporated the rest of the game. I don't even know if I've got the latest pull from my Git over here. If I load up the UV texture map example and play it, will it go? No, because it's got this error here. Give me a second to figure out. Mark doesn't override. Oh, because room tile doesn't have a thing. Let's just set this to virtual. It's got, so this tile map engine has, there we are. It has a bunch of actual, I have this data folder. These are a bunch of classes that are not, if I close all these and reopen, they're not derived from mono behavior, right? They're just their own little base class, for example. So that's pure C#. So, and I'm using some inheritance models for the types of tiles. The idea is I'm trying to develop a tile engine that will work with any game that needs tile maps. And then I'm going to use this as well to re-implement Drill18. I actually started on the tile map engine before Ludum Dare, so I was like, oh, I could probably part things. So if I play this, so you'll see these animations look the same, right? It's the same animations that were in the other game. The bedrooms alternating. There's no gameplay going on here, but it's got that. But if we take a look at the stats, this simulation is running at well over 1,000 frames per second. And that is despite the fact that this particular version here has 10,000 tiles running in the background. If we look at the scene, there's not 10,000 tiles being rendered. And this object here, the visual mesh, is just one mesh. It's one object. You'll see, I can't expand this tile map to see this is a 10 by 10 area. You're not going to see 100 tiles inside of this as children of this. So there's only one game object. One game object is my entire map over here. And I've got a little mouse over here so I can get a little bit of debug information for my purposes. But that means it renders extremely quickly. Also, the update frame rate is extremely fast. I mean, it's just like insanely fast. And that's the visual side of it. I've got it multi-threaded. Because of the way that I'm doing it, I've got one global map object. If I go into, so my tile map renderer has a tile map. This is the tile map that's actually got my data. And every frame, well, sort of, every frame on tile map, I call a function called simulate. You could think of it as update, right? So on update, I call simulate. This is actually the threaded simulate is the one I'm running. I've also got a non-multi-threaded version of simulate there. And so that's running in the background. Now, I call this every visual frame, but threaded simulate is smart enough to check to see if the it's already got a thread running. So if it's got a job running, and then it'll return right away. I mean, either way, it returns right away, but either launches a thread or it doesn't. So if I look at QTileMap, we could probably look at that function. A threaded simulate here. This is a relatively new addition. It wouldn't surprise me if there was sort of a glitch in my multi-threading here. But yeah, it checks to see if if it's already running a thread or not, and it starts it, and I can have it tell me, there we go, in the debug log, how long it took to simulate. So this is my 10,000 tile map. If I check the console log, the simulation is currently running at 5,000 to 6,000 frames per second. And the visuals have dropped now from, instead of running at well over 1,000 frames per second, it's down to 600 frames per second. The reason is spitting out anything to debug log massively slows down Unity. So it lost like 1,000 frames per second because it's writing to the debug log. But you can see that the simulation is running at extraordinarily fast speeds. And even if I take this and bring it to a ridiculous level, if I make the tile map in the background 1,000 by 1,000, so that'll be 1,000,000 tiles. If I hit play, it'll actually take a second to spin up as it generates all these tiles in the background and assigns the memory. But now the simulation is running much slower. But the simulation in the background is still running at 55 frames per second, and the game in the foreground is still running, oddly enough, at like 2,000 frames per second, which I actually don't know why it's running at a higher frame rate in the foreground now. Oh, I know why. It's because I'm not spamming my log as much. Instead of spamming the log many thousands of times per second, I'm only spamming the log 50 times per second. So that explains that frame rate difference there. Yeah, logging stuff is slow, but it's usually fine. So the performance is what I'm going to call very, very good, especially since the simulation really only needs to run at like a couple of FPS. Because all my animations, for example, run at 2 frames per second. So that's all that needs to happen in the simulation thing. Also, it would be very nice if I could run this on tablets and stuff maybe at some point. I mean, you got to keep that in mind from early on. So the fact that a map that is many orders of magnitude bigger than the biggest map I would ever want to run in this game still runs an acceptable performance, at least on, you know, my big desktop PC, is still a pretty damn good sign that that things are behaving pretty well over here. So anyway, so that's what I'm working on. Mostly on this redo, I've only worked on the new tile engine. The tile sheet is laid out a little bit differently. The animations is very interesting. All my animations are just like all my room definitions are just CSV files. They're all text files that I can edit in a spreadsheet editor, basically. And I'll be defining all the rooms in here, which will make modding very easy. Also, there will be a new sprite animation system. I'm not using any of the Unity 2D built-in stuff, so I'll do sort of a sprite sheet like this for my actual workers, but I'll be able to swap between sprite sheets very easily. So having workers with different outfits based on their job will be extraordinarily easy to do. So yeah, so overall, I'm really looking forward to hopefully making a sort of a new and more, you know, real version of Drill18, which may come out with a different name, but you know, and may come out for like it might be a for pay game. We'll see how that goes. Haven't decided any of that stuff yet. Partially depends on how much work it's looking to be. And right now it's looking like it's going to be a fair amount of work to, you know, do a really, really good version of the game with pretty significantly different mechanics. So it's got more longevity there. You know, hopefully it's a game that you play for hours instead of for 5 or 10 minutes. And we'll see how it goes. So stay tuned for some updates on both channels, both youtube.com/Quill18 and this Quill18 Creates channel. For that, also stay tuned. If you haven't done it already, make sure to subscribe at twitch.tv/Quill18. which is where I live stream, because I'm hoping to live stream more of the game development here as we go along. So there you have it. There is the autopsy, the post-mortem of Drill18, the Mars project. And if you have never participated in a Let 'em Dare, you should do it. They run it 3 times a year, and it's tons and tons of fun. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.